All right, new Ryan rant. Um, Something that's been going on for the last couple weeks. Uh, we've talked about it here and there, but I got to thinking about it. Excuse me. And I want to know something. How old were you when you first got red pilled? I got to confess that growing up, I used to fall into the manipulative method of the media being melodramatic about every story they report on. That was until, I witnessed firsthand how one-sided the slander was when it came to cultural acceptability of who can be criticized for their performance as a leader, right? The truth remains that every person, regardless of race, creed, economical status, sexuality, is viewed as evil trash, and in most cases, a traitor to their own kind when siding with the traditional conservative lifestyle as a method of political viewing. This is why we don't see black, Hispanic, or female Republican primary candidates, and we won't see them in the next few elections, at least the presidential elections, that is. Because most females and people of color will side against their version of an Uncle Tom. I guess, I don't know how to put that. I mean, it's the only way I can really think of it, a traitor to your own kind. They'll view them as people trying to pander to the white bread society. But really, it's more of a political, ethical value that they're trying to live by. So no, not every Republican holds this idealism of being conservative and traditional. Some of them are for the money from international trade and job outsourcing, lobbying for more governmental control, regulations, like gun control, regulating freedom of speech. Things like John McCain was for, right? Remember, you don't need an assault rifle, just get a shotgun, get a double barrel shotgun, right? Remember that? Yeah, that guy. It's kind of sickening to see someone who claims they're on the red wave, or claimed rather before he died, sit there and fight for more governmental authority. That's not what we want. So I gotta say, I didn't really start thinking about my rights and freedoms until I was out of the military and on felony deferred adjudication probation. So I joined the military right out of high school, and service members, they waived their constitutional Bill of Rights. But the military has their own legal measures that are similar to the 4th through the 8th Amendment, where, you have your due process, you have your right to speedy trial, things like that. But those are all JAG and IG related. They're not really constitutional rights, because you don't have rights as a service member. You may think you do, but you'll find out real quick what a court-martial is. But as a civilian, you understand you have rights available to you given you're not a felon on probation or on parole, as I was. So a felon on probation or parole, you are essentially still waiving certain rights like the 2nd and the 5th, and even in some cases the 4th, because of the fact that if they want to check on you, if they want to check and see if you're in any possession of any contraband in your household or at your work that you shouldn't legally have, like drugs or weapons, firearms specifically, then they can do that. You don't have your constitutional 4th Amendment when you're on parole or probation. They don't need a justification cause, probable cause. They can just come up and say, hey, I want to check you out, and you have to let them in. Let's see here. It wasn't until getting off probation and having my rights restored that I truly understood the value of my rights and how invaluable they really were as an American citizen that's been on both sides of the fence when it comes to having no rights, be it in the military to protect the rights I'm not entitled to while under contract for the United States military, or being an inmate or a probationer / parolee of the correction system. Neither of those two people have all the constitutional rights available to them. So the desire to want more comes from living with less or even without altogether. Kind of like when someone from a less than desirable financial status gets a good chunk of wealth, like a lot of these lottery winners that we see, and someone of wealth might not view that same chunk of wealth significantly. So, the upper class, the 1%ers, the CEO, he got $50 million, but that's $50 million over 30 years. I get so much per year. $50 million is nothing to me. Okay, so to some it might be gold, to others it just might be lead. It's all a matter of perception, really. So the value of something comes from the initial availability of that which you have or don't. It also stems from an obtainable measure of how difficult it should be to obtain and sustain. Kind of like our rights as citizens bestowed upon us through birth or legal naturalization. If you were granted an inalienable right to live free, speak freely, and defend yourself freely without persecution or prosecution for that matter, such as nations like Turkey that you don't really have any due process. They just put you in jail for whatever fucking reason. That's why the Turkish monopoly, every single space you land on is go straight to jail. Do not pass go, do not collect $200. Seems we have an issue with people trying to trample on our rights and just do whatever they want. So if you had those inalienable rights, you'd feel pretty special, at least until others not born or legally naturalized here try to come here and claim the same rights. Then those rights don't feel as exclusive, do they? They don't. So it's kind of like today's soccer teams. Everyone gets a fucking trophy. Doesn't matter if you won or lost or even played. If you were on the bench the whole time, you still get participation trophy. You get rewarded for doing something that not really doing anything, not accomplishing what it takes to be considered a winner. That's where we're at, and that winner's trophy, especially for those that won the championship in that soccer team, it just doesn't feel as special when all the losing teams, they all get trophies. Yeah, sure, theirs might be a little bigger, might be a little shinier, it might be real metal compared to plastic, but it's the fact that remains that it's still labeled a trophy, a reward for something that they didn't earn. So we don't live in a monarchy kingdom, but the term birthright doesn't grant anyone who's born within castle walls a royal blood, right? So in our case, it'd be born or naturalized citizen. You cannot claim your right to citizenship just as someone who's not in the bloodline of Queen Elizabeth can't claim to be in line for the throne, even if that person was born in the Queen's quarters in Buckingham Palace. So someone breaks in, okay, because that's essentially what's going on here, is someone is illegally entering our nation. So if our nation, in perspective, were a castle, okay, you are, and all the citizens are the royal blood. If you break into a castle, number one, that's, breaking and entering, intruding, whatever you want to call it, and in some cases burglary, and then you have your child. Your child is a product of your illegal activity. That child doesn't automatically become a citizen because the fact that You held no allegiance to America when you illegally entered. You did not even attempt to document yourself, get a green card status, and try to get your pathway to citizenship. You just come here, you have your kid, and you think, okay, boom, my kid's here. Now, if they try to exile me, well, that's racist, or that's just terrible to separate kids from their parents. Okay, well, there are so many parents out there that commit crimes, even if they are citizens, that get separated from their kids because they go to prison. Being an American citizen is special because of its origin of exclusivity from outsiders that just want to reap the rewards without bearing the responsibilities of forced contribution towards our self-sustainment. Now, talking about taxes, as much as we conservatives, we hate taxes, we hate especially taxation without representation. It's the fact that our infrastructure and our education system and a lot of other necessities that keep our system going are funded through forced taxes. So if someone doesn't have a social security number, they can therefore no longer be liable for taxes because there's no way to trace if they're paying or not. Undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, whatever you want to call them, they don't have a way to track their tax ID. They're not paying taxes, and what good are they? So people are saying that Trump is trying to change the 14th Amendment. He's not changing anything. All he's doing is enforcing the text, and the text states, must be born in the United States and holds no allegiance to any foreign nation. If you are against the enforcement of that text, but don't believe a baby born from a home intruder or burglar, so if like a pregnant woman were to break into a house, say she's homeless, right? A homeless woman, let's give it some sympathetic factor. Homeless woman breaks into your house to get out of the cold and have her baby. By your logic, that baby is now entitled to live in your home. It's the same concept. Someone comes in not wanted, not accepted, not with permission, and has a baby, and then expects that baby to coexist in that same home. If it's my house and a kid's born here, that kid doesn't just get to live here. I'm sorry to say, I will send that kid somewhere else because it's not my responsibility. And if someone breaks into your home, has a child, that adult is a criminal, and that baby has the misfortune of getting kicked out because of a parent's mistake. It might sound cruel, but that's the reality we live in. We choose to look out for those we're directly responsible for and don't want to be burdened by those we aren't responsible for. It seems selfish, but it's not. We're only capable of sustaining a small group of people we can only manage. That's the natural order of things. A colonel in the army might be in charge of a couple thousand soldiers at one time, but he's only superior to them in a direct chain of command. He only oversees the 4 to 6 lieutenant colonels that oversee a battalion. And then let's go down the line. That lieutenant colonel only oversees the captains of the 4 to 7 companies, right? Within the battalion. And then that captain only oversees the 3 to 5 platoons that are led by lieutenants. They're not in charge of everyone of that entity. They're only in charge of those that are in charge of the next entity down. And then that lieutenant oversees the section leaders. And then the section leaders oversee the squad leaders, especially in a scout unit where we have a section of a line and then a squad, which is basically 2 or 3 squads to a section. And then that squad leader only oversees 3 to 5 people individually. We're only capable of overseeing and being responsible for about a household size of personnel. I gotta say this. All right, so doesn't matter how high you climb the ladder, you're only going to be in charge of so many people because that's all you're capable of. We can't be overwhelmed with an overbearing amount of responsibility. Just like the taxpayers shouldn't be overwhelmed and overburdened by more than what they're capable or willing to take care of. Birthright citizenship cannot continue because that's not how the 14th Amendment was written. It was written to protect the former slaves that didn't have the same rights, even though they were born here and were a product of forced slavery. Whether or not the people were still slaves at that time, because it was 1868 and certain places still wanted to act on holding slavery, so the 13th Amendment didn't exactly completely abolish everything. It was a timely process, but it gave the former slaves citizenship. It protected them because they were forced here. Now, in regards to this caravan, who's forcing them? Who forced them like the thousands of slaves that got forced over here from Africa? Nobody. Nobody is holding a gun to them. Nobody's threatening their lives if they don't come here and do as we wish. If anything, we don't want them here because a majority of them, I don't want to say all of them, but a majority of them hold no real skill trade or profession and will only burden the welfare system, especially for those that are American citizens that have paid taxes that really need it. So all I want to say is that if you're against enforcing the text, not changing, but enforcing the text, that illegal aliens cannot give birth to a child and grant that child citizenship, then I expect you to open your house. I expect you to tear down any fences that you may have, because that's the concept you're living, is you will welcome anyone into our nation, which is our home. It doesn't matter if you have your subsidized and cordoned off property that you live in. The fact that we have a cordoned off border that sits between Canada and Mexico, that's our fence. That's our backyard and our front yard. We still have a right to say, get off my property because you are not welcome here. You weren't invited here. You didn't ask to be here. You didn't get special permission to be here. So you and your babies gots to go. That is not our problem. I don't care if I sound like an unsympathetic asshole. You are not expected to take care of other people, just as they are not expected to take care of you. We can only handle so much, and that's all we will be willing to deal with, is but so much. And with that said, rant over. Mufasa out.